There was a library that contained what the ancient world knew about itself, not merely a collection of books, a deliberate project to gather everything that had been written up to that point, in any language, from any place. Medical texts from India, mathematics from Babylon, philosophy from Greece, astronomy from Egypt. Everything in one place. Alexandria, the city Ptolemy built to be the intellectual center of the known world. And it worked. For centuries, it worked. Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the Earth with extraordinary precision from Alexandria. Hipparchus mapped the sky. Herophilus described the nervous system. Aristarchus proposed that the Earth revolved around the sun, 17 centuries before Copernicus. The work was in Alexandria. What was lost is not a list of titles. It is an entire line of intellectual development that simply did not exist afterward. Ideas that would have reached conclusions we only arrived at centuries later, or have not yet reached. That is the true cost of burning a library, not the books, the time. Now, let us look at what actually happened, because the story of the burning of Alexandria is more complicated and more disturbing than the popular version. The popular version says Julius Caesar burned the library in 48 BCE during his Egyptian campaign. This is partially true and almost entirely misleading. What Caesar burned were ships in the harbor. The fire spread to warehouses on the docks. Those warehouses contained books, most likely scrolls awaiting export, not the main library collection. The main library probably survived Caesar's fire, but that survival is almost more disturbing than destruction, because what came afterward was worse. In 391 CE, Emperor Theodosius decreed the closure of all pagan temples in the Roman Empire. The Temple of Serapis in Alexandria, which housed a significant portion of the collection, was destroyed by a Christian mob. Not by accident, by decree, by policy. Bishop Theophilus personally led the destruction of the Serapeum. The texts stored there were burned as instruments of heresy. Medical texts, mathematical texts, philosophical texts, astronomical texts, heresy. This was not the end of Alexandria as an intellectual center, but it was the end of the Alexandria that attempted to gather everything. The third blow came in 642 CE with the Arab conquest of Egypt. Historical tradition, contested but persistent, attributes to the general Amr ibn al-As the order to burn what remained of the library with the phrase, "If the books agree with the Quran, they are superfluous. If they disagree, they are heretical." The phrase may be apocryphal. The debate about its authenticity continues today, but the material result, the disappearance of what remained, is documented. What is disturbing is not which of the three fires was decisive. It is that there were three, in three completely different political contexts, with three completely different justifications. Pagan Rome, Christian Rome, Islamic Caliphate. Three civilizations, three ideologies, one identical conclusion. This knowledge must not exist. This is not coincidence, it is a pattern, and patterns have logic. The logic is this: centralized knowledge is power, and centralized power threatens any new order attempting to establish itself. It doesn't matter the ideology, the mechanism is identical. What is impossible to recover is not what we know was there, it is what was there and we do not know. We know the titles of some lost works because other authors cited them. Those authors survived, the cited works did not. We know Aristotle wrote about comedy with the same rigor he applied to tragedy, the second book of the Poetics, lost. We know Epicurus wrote more than 300 texts, we have fragments of 3. We know there were Alexandrian mathematicians whose names reached us only as references in the works of others, their works gone. This is the ghost of a library, not absolute silence, silence with echoes. Echoes sufficient to know what was lost, insufficient to recover it. There is a detail about how the library functioned that is frequently forgotten in the popular narrative. The Ptolemies did not merely collect books, they confiscated books. Every ship arriving in the port of Alexandria had its cargo inspected. Any scroll found was confiscated, copied, and the copy returned to the owner. The original stayed. The Ptolemies also borrowed original works from Athens for copying. They offered a gold deposit as guarantee. They kept the originals. They returned to the copies. Athens received copies. Alexandria kept Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, the originals. This means that when Alexandria burned, it was not copies that burned. It was the originals of the greatest texts in Greek literature. What we read today of Aeschylus are medieval copies of copies of copies of copies. Each generation of copying introduces errors. Each error becomes canonical. We do not read Aeschylus. We read an approximation of Aeschylus that passed through centuries of human hands. And of the texts of which we have not even copies, Aristotle on comedy,
The Alexandrian mathematicians, the translated Indian medical works, we have only silence. There is a question that historians of science ask with increasing frequency. How much of the scientific revolution of the 17th century was rediscovered knowledge? Galileo and heliocentrism. Aristarchus had already proposed heliocentrism 17 centuries earlier. The work was in Alexandria. Harvey in the circulation of blood. Herophilus of Alexandria had described the cardiovascular system with extraordinary precision centuries before. The question is not whether these modern scientists copied, it is whether they were rediscovering what had already been discovered and lost. If the answer is yes, even partially, then the 1,000 years between Alexandria and the scientific revolution were not merely the Dark Ages, they were an unnecessary restart. A restart that cost how much? In uncured diseases because medicine regressed. In voyages that ended in tragedy because cartography was lost. In structures that collapsed because Roman engineering was partially lost with the texts that underpinned it. We cannot calculate the cost. That is the problem. The loss erased the instruments of its own measurement. There is a surviving fragment that illustrates the problem with disturbing precision. The Antikythera mechanism, a Greek analog computer from the 2nd century BCE that calculated astronomical movements with extraordinary precision, was found in a shipwreck in 1901. It was more complex than any European technology that would exist for 1400 years afterward. And the texts that explained how to build it, how to use it, how to develop that technology, were in Alexandria. When Alexandria was destroyed, that thread of technological development was cut. Europe would take 1400 years to resume it. 1400 years, by a political decision, made 3 times. Let us return to what survived, because what survived is in itself extraordinary. It survived because it was copied in Christian monasteries, by monks who did not necessarily understand what they were copying, but copied with rigor. It survived because it was translated into Arabic during the Abbasid Caliphate, when Islamic scholars recognized its value and preserved what Christian Rome had tried to erase. The history of the preservation of classical knowledge is in significant part an Islamic history. This is rarely stated with the clarity it deserves. And what the European Renaissance rediscovered, Aristotle, Euclid, Galen, it rediscovered largely through Arabic translations of Greek originals that the West itself had destroyed. Rome destroyed, Islam preserved. Europe rediscovered what it had destroyed through what Islam had preserved. And yet we rarely tell the story that way. What does all of this reveal about the nature of knowledge as a political object? It reveals that knowledge was never neutral, never merely information. It was always an instrument of power, and therefore always a target for those who wanted power. The Library of Alexandria was threatening because it was universal, because it belonged to no specific ideology, because it contained truths that predated the truths of whoever came to power afterward. Truths that predate power are always dangerous to power, because they suggest that power could be otherwise. Burning a library is not an act of ignorance, it is an act of political intelligence. Those who burn know exactly what they are doing. And that is why it happened 3 times, in 3 centuries, in 3 distinct civilizations. It was not chance, it was not war. It was the politics of knowledge operating with disturbing consistency across centuries and ideologies. We live today in a moment of distributed libraries, digital, redundant, technically impossible to burn. But knowledge can still be made inaccessible, still removed from platforms, still defunded until it disappears from practice. Fire has changed its form, the logic has not. Alexandria burned 3 times, and each time someone decided it was better that way. What is disturbing is not the destruction, it is the decision, calculated, repeated, transcultural. And the question that remains is not historical, it is present. What is being decided now, in rooms we cannot see, about what should or should not continue to exist?